Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Today's session is on compassionate leadership, the key element to developing a culture of belonging. My name is Miriam Chamberlain, and I'm your host today. Before we jump into the session, I just wanted to highlight some important and useful features of the platform. I'm sure most are familiar with AirMeet, but we would like to keep this engaging throughout the presentation. So in the chat section, feel free to add your comments, questions, remarks, all in the chat section. And actually, I should mention, reserve your questions for the Q&A section because we will be having a couple minutes at the end. I'll moderate the session and you'll have an opportunity to ask Lorie some questions or perhaps get on stage if you would like to and have an interactive session as well. If anyone would like to share hashtag SHRC21 on any of the social media platforms, please feel free to do so. And just as a reminder, this is a recorded session. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Lorie Corcuera. There, I said it. I did it. Lorie is actually joining us from Vancouver and is the head of HR at DNEG, one of the world's leaders in the film and creative industry. Lorie is passionate about building healthy and inclusive workplace cultures. With over 20 years of experience in both corporate and consulting practices, Lorie has mastered the importance of building a culture and belonging strategy and implementation. Lorie's experience expands across many different verticals, including learning and development, diversity and inclusion, and promoting workplaces that inspire purpose, meaningful connection, and impact. I just love that part. Leading and loving by example is her mantra. In addition to being a culture and belonging strategist, Lorie has a passion for rock climbing and has done that for almost 25 years all over the world. And her very favorite spot to rock climb is in Ton Sai Beach in Thailand. She loves chai tea, Caesars, so do I, and French fries. And Lorie's purpose is to, quote unquote, to live wow and love completely. So on that note, Lorie, we're delighted to have you today, and let's dive in. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you so much for that introduction, Miriam. I have never added the chai tea and spicy Caesars and French fries before in my bio, and I'm so happy that I did because those are my all-time favorites. And who also likes those types of things? Or feel free to share your favorite foods or drinks in the chat, just so I know that you're there. And thanks again for taking the time to be here, because Mary and I were talking, and today was an extremely busy day for some reason. I just had back-to-back meetings and had this session booked, ironically, during my lunch break. So I would have been eating my lunch, and here I am, and I'm so happy to be here. So again, my name is Lorie, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm really excited to have this conversation around compassionate leadership. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll know that I talk about love in the workplace. I think the first time I shared about love in the workplace was at a Disrupt HR talk back in 2016. So it has been a journey talking about compassionate leadership. And some people are like, yes, I get it. I love it. Let's talk about it more. And some people are like, what? What does that even mean? Like, I don't know. I feel a little bit uncomfortable. And it's okay, because wherever we are, you know, I think love and compassion, they mean different things for different people at different times of their lives. And wherever you are, it's just okay. All I ask for our session today is that you bring your curiosity, your openness to learn, and, you know, let's co-create this experience together. I also invite you to bring your own thoughts and ideas. My style of facilitating or speaking is usually very interactive, so I'll always ask you a question and get you to answer before I share. That's probably the coach that's in me. And so let's get started. I'm gonna actually share my screen. And I've got two laptops happening here, so hopefully I'm clicking on the right thing here. So you're gonna also notice that I am sharing a lot of really beautiful images that come from my company, DNEG, because we are in the visual effects and animation industry. So I thought, why not share some of the movies that we worked on? So you will see some really cool images that our team have created all over the world, because we have 9 studios globally and about 7,000 people. And I primarily am focused on Vancouver and LA, and most recently for Montreal and Toronto, so all of North America. So here we go. I wanted to also, I shared already my intention of really co-creating that experience with you. And Miriam shared my purpose this just a moment ago, to live well and love completely. And what that means for me is that it's all about co-creating a wow experience. And so when people say wow, that means they're learning something, they're growing, maybe they're even getting a little bit uncomfortable. And then the love completely is a reminder for me to have self-compassion, because I'm also learning with all of you. I'm never going to say I'm an expert on anything. So that's why I'm calling all of us to have this conversation together. And the completely is to ensure that you all feel safe to share and have some authentic conversations, that you feel seen, heard, and cared for as much as possible through this virtual space. So I will try to manage some of the comments on and acknowledge some of the comments that you're sharing in the chat. And I also want to start off with a land acknowledgement. So this is something that I have been on my own journey, maybe the last 3 years. So it's very, very new. Unfortunately, being raised in Canada and born in Winnipeg, I did not have any education around the Indigenous history, the true history of Canada. So I really want to honor the history by sharing a little bit of a story. So I'm not going to read the land acknowledgement, because you can read it there and everyone's been reading it more and more, which is amazing. What I want to share with you is that I am personally committed to unlearning and learning about our history. And most recently, through the Indigenous History Corcuera course, which is a free course on Corcuera's 12-week, there's some learning there about the history. And specifically, I learned that Stanley Park, which is where Lumberman's Arch is, and it's for the people who are in the East Coast or outside of Vancouver, it's about a 20-minute walk from my place. I live in the downtown core in Yaletown, so it's about 20 minutes along the seawall. I get to Stanley Park. Stanley Park was actually the site of a 3,000-year-old Coast Salish village called Hoi Hoi. And it was the Hoi Hoi people that actually welcomed George Vancouver in 1792. In 1792. And what I learned is that this village actually perished from smallpox, because the Hoi Hoi people, when they were welcoming the settlers, they were given blankets that had the smallpox on it. And that then they perished, and that went throughout the whole village. And in 1888, the archaeological records were destroyed. So it's really, really important that we keep this history alive, and that we keep learning and growing. All right, so I'm going to start off with a story about myself, because you're probably wondering, why is compassionate leadership, like, why does it mean, like, why do I talk about love all the time, and why does it mean so much to me? And then how does that relate to creating a culture of belonging? So this is a picture of my mom. You can see she's got the glasses, and then I'm there with the big smile and the pink jacket. And then I have a little sister who's 10 years younger. That's Anne-Marie. She's a baby there. And then Lynn in the maroon. And you can see my mom, we're at Jericho Beach, which is a beach here in Vancouver. And, she seems okay, but this was actually a really hard time for her because she had gone through, or she was going through a lot of violence at home. And so she actually raised us as a single mom, the 3 daughters, which I don't even know how she did it, but she was working multiple jobs, and then she was raising us, and she was basically doing the best she can to take care of us. And what I remember growing up is that my mom would be there. I remember her hugging me and asking me about school or whatever, but she wasn't really there. Like, you could tell she was kind of just going through the motions, showing up as a mom and doing what she can to sort of take care of us, but she wasn't fully present. And it made me start to think about ourselves as leaders within an organization, and just how important it is for us to take care of ourselves, but also to create that space for us to care for other people. So that's how I link it. I think that self-compassion, starting with ourselves, is so important, to take the time to understand who we are, so we can love ourselves, so that we can then be fully present. So we're not just showing up as a leader, going on to the Zoom and saying, hey, hello, how are you? But you're actually listening. You're actually, even before the meeting, being present and really taking the time. So this is all going to link up into the conversation today about what it really means to create a culture of belonging, and how compassion is this leadership skill or human skill that could really support us to foster that belonging culture. So here's what we're going to learn in our, I think, 30 to 5 minutes together. Would love for us to define the meaning of belonging. There's lots of different meanings, but this is a question that I'm always curious about, what it means for each of us, because we're all unique individuals. Why does it even matter, belonging? Defining compassionate leadership, starting with just defining compassion on its own, and then how does that show up within the workplace? And then let's talk about practical strategies. I'm going to share with you, being in this role that I'm in right now, how compassion actually helped me, start a new role and lead a team virtually, and how it's going now, having just completed my 1-year anniversary. All right, and again, I want to share a context as well, that before we talk about leadership, that we are all leaders. When I talk about leadership, we are all leaders. It's not about your title or rank. It's about leading self. So when I talk about leadership, it will come from that place. It's always about, what can we do to make that choice to show up in the best way we can, leader or human being as a whole. So I just want you to sort of think about that as a foundation to our conversation. All right. So the meaning of belonging. So I'm just curious, how would you define belonging? What does belonging mean to you? So in the chat, I would love to hear from the participants who's joined our conversation. What does belonging mean to you? And how does it feel? Like, think about your current workplace. How do you feel when you belong? What are some of the words just to describe that feeling? For me, I know that I feel I belong is because, when my boss calls me up or checks up on me, they're asking me, how are you feeling today? Like, they are taking the time and making the effort to check in, not just like, how are you, or fine. They go deeper into that. Yeah, a sense of connection, feeling part of the team. Yeah, safe space and to safely disagree, for sure, right? You feel that you can challenge or make a mistake or add a comment, and there's not going to be any judgment or criticism. You feel like your voice is heard, for sure. Yeah, and you're connected with others. Connection is always a big one, right? It's the way we feel connected. And again, connection can be different things, but I was just curious. And all of that is right on the mark around what belonging means to you. It's all important. And I even would encourage you, when you're talking to people at work or your loved ones, ask them, what does it mean for you to feel like you belong? We do this thing called a trust agreement when I do one-on-one sessions or team sessions or strategy sessions. We actually create like a designed alliance or trust agreement, and we go around and we answer 2 questions. What do I need to feel safe and belong, and how will I contribute to that, to creating belonging? So those are kind of the things that you can already use as a tool to create that sense of belonging and psychological safety. So I love Brené Brown. Who loves Brené Brown? Say yes if you do. I follow her. If you have not read any of her books yet, or had not even watched her TED Talk, I highly recommend you do that sometime today or this weekend. She's someone that I just feel, every time she speaks, she's funny and she's just so inspiring. And I love her definition of belonging. If I get to be me, I belong. If I have to be like you, I fit in. And what I really love about this is that in the workplace, we talk a lot about culture fit. And it's just, it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because what we're trying to say is you're trying to fit, into something, versus you are being honored for who you are. And people are wanting to allow you to be yourself, and then within the organization, and then there's this perfect match. So it's more about values alignment versus trying to fit in. So I love this definition, that if I get to be me, I belong. So keep that in mind as a definition. But if you have a definition of belonging, feel free to also share that in the chat. So, why does belonging matter? So, I always like to start with why it matters, because when people are still trying to figure out what is culture or what is belonging, it's good to share some facts to really support that. And I know that for my fellow HR or even business leaders, when we're trying to, confirm like what's the ROI of anything, or like what's the impact to the key results, I have to then provide data. So here's some data points that will support you when you're thinking about or wanting to create more belonging. Belonging is a primal and fundamental to our sense of belonging, or sense of happiness and well-being. So it is one of the 6 human needs, right? We need to feel a sense of belonging. We're born that way. That's part of our human need. So that's, keep that in consideration, regardless of being in a workplace or a community, or even a country. The other one that I would highlight is from Work Human Research Institute and IBM, where they say that one of the 5 dimensions of employee experience index is that belonging is belonging, feeling a part of a team or group or organization. So belonging is already one of the 5 dimensions to employee experience. Another one is the Gallup Q12. I know it's a little bit old now, because I know we've been talking about that for a long time, but if you still follow Gallup in their studies, they're saying that the 5th element of engagement is that my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. So I want to highlight the word care, right? Whether we're talking about love, connection, or compassion or empathy, caring is like, how do we make people feel that they feel cared for, right? Another data point is that, psychologically safe environments where people feel safe, they have improved performance. Now, that's probably a given. I don't have to even refer to New York Times. Just think about yourself when you're coming into work every day. When people feel they belong, you just feel more inspired to share and to create and to do more, to show up more. Maybe you do a little bit of extra work because you feel like it's part of something bigger and someone cares about it. And then lastly, this one's a little bit on the scary side, but I like to share it because it is still a fact. There was a 2-year research that was done by Dr. Jeffrey Preffer, and I actually started sharing this, I think, in 2017. So it's a little bit old now, but it's still relevant, even more during this global pandemic, that toxic workplaces are the 5th leading cause of death. And even though it's a bit heavy, it's important for us to understand why that is important, because when we don't have a sense of belonging, let's think about the opposite of that. People feel excluded, they don't feel valued, they're disengaged, they're disconnected. It's not just going to affect productivity, it's going to affect their mental health, right? And I think about when I go in my job every day, in my work, and when I share with my team, I always say to them, we're more than just people within an HR department or even within DNIC. We have an opportunity as human beings to leave a positive impact on people, so that when they go home, they have that positive experience. Imagine, a mom or a father or a parent coming home and being excited, or having a nice sense of, joy that they have from their workday, that their children is seeing that. And then that's the impact. So I just feel that love is contagious. So defining compassionate leadership, what is compassion? I'd love to hear from our participants. What is compassion? How would you define that? I'll just give you a moment to share. How would you define compassion? What words come up for you? Compassion. And so I'll give you hints. Some people say it's empathy, that they kind of interchange, but there is a difference between empathy and compassion. Understanding, yeah, there you go. Yeah, Angela said empathy. Understanding. What else? When you feel someone's being compassionate towards you, or you have compassion for another person, what do you think is happening there? What's some emotions that are happening? Yes, caring, for sure, caring. So a lot of human skills. I that's why I think it's so important. But the actual root of compassion, the word compassion, comes from com, which is with or together, and then pati is to suffer. The Latin word for compassion is com, and pati is to suffer. So what that actually means is that Compassion is when we suffer together, or the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. So that was the greater good that actually came up with that quote. So basically what this means is that we're suffering, or we're experiencing this emotion together, but the difference is that we are motivated to relieve that suffering. And I'll share why this is key, because there's a lot of talk around empathy, right? Empathy, there was a Forbes article that empathy is like the new leadership skill, or the skill that we need to learn more of, right? We talk about it in emotional intelligence, to be able to put ourselves in another person's shoes. And those are really important reasons for empathy, for sure. I totally agree with that. And when you talk about compassion, though, the difference is that we can feel another person's feeling, but if it's truly empathy, we might get stuck in that feeling, right? We might feel so much of that sorrow or that suffering that we ourselves are so in it that we can't move forward and do something about it. So the difference with empathy and compassion, that compassion is a little bit more objective, where you can feel it, and then you can also do something with it. You're not so in it that you feel stuck. You actually are inspired to take action. And so compassion is actually empathy plus action. There's definitely an action to it, which is why I am so focused on compassion. I love empathy. We need to do more empathy. I think that's definitely, a way for us to really connect with each other and be vulnerable and really listen and create inclusion. And I think with compassion, it just takes it to the next level. And here's how we're going to talk a little bit about it. So now a question for you is, what qualities define a compassionate leader? What qualities define a compassionate leader? So we started to define compassion as caring and understanding. What else would you say in the workplace of a leader? How does compassion show up? What would that look and feel like in the work? Yes, active listener, for sure. Being more present, leaning in. If we're talking about visual, like, eye contact, asking questions, being interested, right? It was perspective taking, for sure, right? You are open and you're curious. You probably have a sense of wanting to learn more about yourself, so that you could better understand other people, or you could show up better as a leader. So compassionate leadership is the ability to do hard things in a human way. And if you're curious about any of these resources or articles, I will share it at the very end. But this is actually from an HBR article. And I love this definition, because to do hard things in a human way is so hard. To be a compassionate leader is not easy, because it first takes work for you to have compassion for yourself before you can even have compassion for others. And so here are more qualities: self-aware, self-compassionate, genuine, curious, being vulnerable, which I know Brené Brown talks a lot about, and just being courageous, actually being the first to say something, to do something, right? To lead by example. Listens to understand. I think there's a difference between just listening and to actually respond, versus listening to understand. Empathetic, intentional, lifelong learner, encouraging, purpose and values driven, which is really, really key. And in order to do that, you need to understand what your purpose and values are. To be collaborative, loving, kind, forgiving, wants to be of service, and stand for the greater good. And it really is, I will share with you in a moment, three-dimensional, right? So there's leading self, leading others, and leading the business or community. And that's where that stand for the greater good is. You're less about yourself and the ego of like, ooh, what about me? To really more focused to others. But the only way you can get out of that ego is learning more about yourself. And then when you know more about yourself, you can accept and eventually love yourself and have self-compassion. And then you can actually be there for others. So before I actually move on, there was a poll I wanted to share, and I'm going to just pull it up, because I'm just curious to see where people are at with it. Now that we've defined compassionate leadership, a little bit about belonging, I have a quick poll just to see where we're at around compassion. And there's no right or wrong answer, but this will give us an idea of where we're all at as it relates to being a compassionate leader. So which of these following statements resonates with you? Can you see? Can you see it? I just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, here we go. Wow. Okay. A lot of people are, some people are feeling, I am a compassionate leader, which is amazing. I sometimes lead with compassion, yes, and I'm still learning. I think I'm all three. I think some days I feel like, okay, I've got it. I'm present, I'm listening. And then I have a long night. I can't sleep. I wake up in the morning and I'm thrown off from my morning ritual. And then I get a little bit irritable. And then I haven't taken care of myself. So now I'm sometimes leading with compassion or really taking as much energy to do that. So the learning of compassion, I think it's like anything else. It's a lifelong journey for us to continuously be more mindful and conscious about how we show up, whether it's compassion or empathy or curiosity. So, or just, in general, being a leader. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that poll. I'm just going to close that now. Very cool features. Okay, so what are some practical strategies around compassion? So I basically, yeah, as I shared, there are three. When I do leadership training, I always talk about 3 dimensions, and this is nothing new. So I'm sure that you've all heard about it as well. The same concept: leading self, leading others, and leading the business. And when you look at the center, for me, it always starts with the leading self. If I'm not doing well as a person, then it affects the way I show up every day. So that's why we're going to start with the leading self. And then you can refer to the last couple of slides about how it show up as a leader with others. But I'm going to really focus on ourselves. How can we be more self-compassionate? So here are some practical strategies for self-compassion. Number one is set boundaries. How many of you are really good at setting boundaries? I don't know if I should have answered the question the other way around because okay, we got some thumbs up. Okay, good. I'm still learning how to do that. Saying no is really hard for me because I'm such a pleaser. I just want to be of service, especially in my role in HR. And at the same time, when I've been able to say no or say yes to me, it's actually been very beneficial. So even recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was feeling really full at work. So I just asked my boss, can I take the next couple of days? It was after Thanksgiving Day, and I made it an extended week. Can I just take a week off? I didn't go anywhere. It was a staycation, and it was really for me personally a mental health week, like just my own wellness week that I could take care of myself. But then it gave me so much energy to today now to actually be here with you, but also be here with my team. So think about those days or think about those moments where you can just ask for support. Number two is be mindful. So this is something that I've also, been really good at. Maybe the last couple of weeks I've struggled. Again, it just depends, but I try to actually meditate in the morning or pause and breathe. So being mindful, whatever way that helps you, whether it's walking or just kind of taking a break, but just really what can you do to be more present so that you can then take the time to listen to yourself and allow yourself to just be. Right. I think that's part of that self-compassion, just letting go. It's okay not to be okay. And then breathe and then acknowledge how you're feeling and then move on. Number three is creating a morning ritual. So this is a big thing for me. If I miss my workout, my meditation, drinking my water, which is all part of my morning ritual, I'm totally off. When I'm doing it though, in the moment, I don't even feel it. I'm like, is this meditation actually working? I use the Calm app. But the moments that I don't, it is noticeable. So what is that morning ritual for you, right? Everyone's going to be different. Think about and try different things too. Maybe, you try meditation, or maybe you do dancing, or you, whatever, journaling, right? So try different thing, experiment, and then create that morning ritual, and then be okay to change it up a little bit too, right? Sometimes a ritual becomes a little bit like, it starts to become repetitive, and of course it's a ritual, it's repetitive, but you might want some variety to change it up depending on what works for you. But start your day right. And then number 4 is practice gratitude. So there are tons of research on the science of gratitude. I actually took that course, The Science of Well-Being, from Corcuera. Highly recommend it. It's totally free, but it's so helpful. And gratitude is one of those things that will help our well-being. Now, I can also share with you that there's been days where I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and I'm like, oh, what am I grateful for? And it was really a struggle. However, you just got to go through it. You just got to say, you just have to focus. And the more and more it becomes natural, then your mind and your thoughts focus on what's good. And so, again, it's like working out, right? You're building a muscle. It doesn't might be feeling uncomfortable in the beginning, but and it might not even feel like something's happening, but just keep at it and it will bring so much more to your life. And then number 5 is becoming more self-aware. So I put that in there because part of compassionate leadership is really taking the time to understand who we are. How can we love ourselves? How can we be self-compassionate if we don't even know who we are? And so taking the time to understand who we are, what's our triggers, what's inspiring for us, what brings us fulfillment and joy, then you can start to really understand who you are and you get to know and fall in love with yourself again. That's what happened to me. I started to fall in love with myself again because we were born with love. We grew up. Everything's in life started making us challenge those thoughts, and then all we do when we're getting older is like trying to learn more about who we are. So I feel like it's coming back home. And lastly is to strengthen our vulnerability. So for me, that is really, really key. And the way to do it is, speaking to you about it, sharing my story, just as many times doing things that might make me feel uncomfortable, because that's where the growth happens. But the more I do that or make decisions that are hard, but in the long run was supporting me, the more that I strengthen my vulnerability, the more you strengthen the love and compassion for yourself as well. So those are the practical strategies. If you have any, please share that in the chat. Again, we're all learning and growing together. Here are some resources as well. And I'm not sure we're going to share the slides after the session. I know it's being recorded, but if you want a copy of these slides, I'm happy to share it because it's on Google Slides. I could easily send it to you. And I'm totally an open source or open to sharing everything. If you want to actually facilitate a similar session within your organizations or with your friends, just take it, add your photo, your stories, your logo, whichever, and start sharing it, because that's how we share more love in the workplace. So my call to action for you is, what's one thing you will do today to strengthen your compassion? What's one thing you will do today to strengthen your compassion? If you could share that in the chat, that would be amazing, because you can love by example and someone might be inspired by your action and do something about it. So will you listen more? Will you practice more gratitude? Will you facilitate a conversation within your organization to define what belonging means to them? Whatever that might be, that would be amazing to take what we've just talked about and actually action on it. And I'll leave you with one last quote, and then I know Miriam's ready to ask some questions. Compassion is not a virtue. It is a commitment. It's not something we have or don't have. It's something we choose to practice. It's something that we choose to practice. Thanks, everyone. Over to you now, Miriam.
Thank you so much, Lorie. That was great. We do actually have about 5 more minutes before we wrap up here today. Does anyone have any questions, or would anyone like to come on stage and engage with Lorie and I?
They just have to put their hand up, and then we bring them onto the stage.
Invite them on. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for some questions to come through, if any, Lorie, I did have a question. In terms of sometimes as HR leaders within our workplaces, we work with other leaders that are maybe not as compassionate or not compassionate with how they're working with their teams. So what are some ways that as an HR leader we can influence that, or help them be more compassionate?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that comes up to my mind is, training, like maybe educating. But I know that, some people are too busy, or you can't just overnight become a compassionate leader from one session, one video, one article. So for me, the way that I've been able to influence more compassion in our workplace is really to lead by example. So I'll give you a real example. When I first started, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to go during the day without saying the word love. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to be me, right? So I use the word love all the time. And our GM here, in one of our meetings, he actually says, we need to love our people more. And I was like so excited because he actually used the word love. And I don't know, I'm thinking it was because of me, but I don't know, maybe he's also a love bug, but I've never heard him say that before. So when he said it, it just made me, it reaffirmed that I got to keep doing what I'm doing, just be myself, keep loving and sharing that love. And it will, it will start to influence. So I think the biggest thing is, again, starting with ourselves. How can we show up better as leaders and human beings? And then keep doing that consistently, so that when you're interacting with other leaders, especially if you are in a more leadership role, they can start feeling what that looks and feels like, and then hopefully that will inspire them as well.
That's great, Lorie. Thanks so much for sharing. And just before we wrap up, is there any questions at all that anyone has? Feel free to raise your hand. You don't want me to pick on you, do you?
Well, I'm just excited that there's at least a few people here that are connecting with us. Yeah, compassion with self, going for a workout. Yes, love it. Yeah, lots of rituals, humans being first. Yes. For me, I define culture, workplace culture, and I'd love to hear what Miriam's definition is, as the heart and energy of a shared human experience, because we are all humans, even if it's within a workplace. That's kind of my definition of culture. What's your definition of culture or belonging?
Yeah, it's I love that you use the word love, but for me, it's really what is the DNA of the company, right? So like, how do we define ourselves? Who are we? And if it is, do we lead with compassion and empathy, and like, how do we manage our workforce in such a way that we make it people centric and human focused? And I think that's really really important. And that's with everything and every practice, regardless of the verticals that you're working within. So whether that's talent acquisition, performance management, HR governance, learning and development, starting with that people centric approach is always kind of the way I look at ensuring that culture is a culture of belonging right from the start, even before you build out your objective, before you build out your plan. And it's just starting with that people centric approach.
Amazing. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lorie, for being here. And I apologize for my kids yelling in the background.
It's all good.
But thank you so much for spending your time with us today, spending your lunch hour with us all the way from Vancouver. Thank you for the participants today and engaging in discussion. All these are really great points. I hope everyone can stick around. Jeff is going to have some final remarks, I guess, in a couple minutes now. So if we can head back to the lounge and we can engage in that last session, that would be wonderful. Thank you once again. And it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.